Gary, good to see you. Thanks for making a bit of time to come and have a chat. I appreciate that because I know you're busy. I want to kick off the interview by asking you about something that we spoke about a few weeks back. You said to me that basically five companies around the world control all the kind of hearing technology. I mean, why does that matter? And why is it important for you?
Well, that's a great starting question. Yeah, let me clarify that a little bit. What you find is, and this happens in many industries, you find that the leading brands that control most of the market are copied by a lot of smaller companies. So, whatever they put into their product,
Yeah.
everyone else then puts into it a few months later. And it's no different around hearing. So, the biggest hearing related companies kind of set the tone, and that includes the enormous brands like Samsung and Apple and Sony.
Yeah.
And in the hearing world, it's no different. You've got companies like Sonova and Demont and things like that. And so whatever they put into their products becomes the next standard, and the pace of innovation is really dictated by them, and everyone else just follows behind. Um, and we see that as a massive opportunity to do something a little bit different and think beyond that and kind of work a few steps ahead of them and say, well, what does the future really look like? How do we help people that are not getting serviced at the moment and deliver that kind of technology platform?
Okay, so you've mentioned this tech that you're developing. I mean, tell us a bit about it. I mean, give us a sense of what it does, and who it's for, and how it helps.
Yeah, well, we've identified that there's, hundreds of millions of people with hearing problems. Everything from, being able to struggle in conversations in noisy places, or even just watching TV. So many people today read TV because they have the captions on
Yeah.
rather than watching it and enjoying the immersive sound. And so during a typical day, you find that a lot of people have these issues, and today's products don't really help them out on an individual basis. So rather than look at this as a lot of individual products, we took the view of what happened with computing and telephony. In that computing led us to what we have today, which is a laptop, and telephony has now become a smartphone. And both of those products gained global adoption
Mm.
because the end user decides what they do after they buy it. So you download new software into those devices whenever you need it. But we can't do that with our ears at the moment. We get these products and they're fixed function, they're static. In some cases, they have to be configured by a trained professional, such as an audiologist. And it's just a very slow and cumbersome way of helping people hear. So we said, well, why don't we turn it into a fully fledged computing platform
Wow.
and let people download software into that device whenever they need it, just like you do with your phone. And it turns out that there's hundreds of companies that have created fantastic software. They're just not getting access to the people that need it. And so we sit in the middle and we join these people together.
So what you're just so I've got this right, what you're saying is that you can customize people's hearing experiences. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. And everyone has a different need. So
Yeah.
you can't do it with some basic filters and EQs. We need to be much more intelligent than that. Some people have a very high sensitivity of a particular sound. Let's say it's a dog barking. And why can't we have an intelligent layer in our device that says, well, when I hear that sound, I'll turn on the noise cancelling? Simple things like that could be delivered, but they're not a one size fits all.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, just tell me what is it that kind of set you on this path? Because it's quite an interesting area to go into. I mean, how did you end up on this kind of track, if you like?
Um, well, there's a number of elements in my journey that kind of contributed to this. So I've spent a lot of time building professional audio equipment and also consumer audio
Right.
devices and chips and processors and so on. And all of those technologies ended up in products that were basically all the same. If you think about Bluetooth headphones today, they're kind of all the same.
Yeah.
And yet there are lots of people that have a very distinct need, and that product doesn't help them. And one particular situation really revealed this. So we were working with a university that helped children who are on the neurodiverse spectrum. Some of them have quite severe autism,
Mm.
and they reacted very positively to certain types of sounds, but also negatively to others. And so that sensitivity is something that the university were working with them to help with, but there was no way to deliver it to these kids when they needed it. So within the lab setting, it was fine. They can
Mm.
help them, but they couldn't take it home with them, and they couldn't wear it at school or in a busy classroom or in a restaurant. And so we said, well, why don't we build something that can help them? Let's build a little tiny wearable computer that would allow these kids access to this technology that had been created. And we then noticed there's loads and loads of these things going on. You're helping people with tinnitus or
Mm.
sensitivity or hyperacusis. There's all these different applications out there. It's just not getting to the person that needed it.
And how, why is that important to you? I mean, you could have done lots of things. I mean, why did you particularly pick on this issue? I mean, why does this thing matter to you particularly?
Well, the initial reaction was, look at the difference it makes to these people.
Mm.
This wasn't just like helping someone listen to Spotify on the tube. This was life changing for these
Right.
people. And the frustration was that the technology existed. It wasn't that there was years of research to go through. The technology's there. It just simply wasn't being adopted into today's products. But there's also a personal element to this because I have this condition, tinnitus, which
Mm.
is this like permanent ringing in the ears. And it can be pretty upsetting at
Yeah.
times because,
Yeah.
the first thing you hear when you wake up is this screaming in your head. And so I was digging around looking for some technologies that might help. And again, I found the same thing. There's loads of great research being carried out, and there's technology that's on the shelf ready to go. It's just not going into the products. And so the whole point of our hearing computer platform is we can bypass the decision makers within those product companies and let people get direct access to the tech they need. So people like me can actually get something that helps.
Yeah. Okay. So you've got a personal interest in trying to fix the problem.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, and it turns out there's hundreds of millions of people just like me
Yeah.
that would like to do something about this ringing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, how are you defining? I know you've got quite big ambitions. I mean, how are you defining success here? Because, I mean, is that getting one of these devices into the hands of every person that's got a hearing issue? I mean, how are you defining success?
Yeah, that's the ultimate goal is to make sure that when somebody has a hearing problem, they can get immediate access to something that's going to help them without having to go through this very drawn out process of trying to first of all justify that you do have this condition
Mm.
and then ultimately get to a product that helps. So success for us is trying to help those people, but along the way, learning about some of these new conditions that are coming up. Very recently, we became aware of something called auditory processing disorder,
Hmm.
which effectively means that your hearing ability is fine, but you have a brain problem, which makes it very difficult to understand sounds in particular
Yeah,
scenarios.
yeah,
And so you can go to the doctor and do an audiologist test, and they say, no, your hearing's fine, but I can't understand speech when it's noisy, for example. And this kind of links back to the TV use case. I can hear the TV just fine, but
mm.
I find it really difficult to understand speech in some programs. And so we're uncovering loads of these different conditions. People are working on it. And so let's give them a way to actually get it into the
And
market.
will your technology be able to address such a wide range of things?
Well, probably not the first version. We see a roadmap of these things over
Right.
time. The first one obviously has limitations in its capabilities, but we have been targeting professional users, DJs and musicians who are exposed to a lot of sound all day long.
Yeah, yeah,
And what conditions do they have to deal with, and how can we help them? First of all, protect their hearing by limiting how much sound they're exposed to, but also helping them before and after an event. And then part of that is also learning what has to come next. And so we see our product roadmap growing quite significantly over the next few years.
Yeah. And just to explain to people in a practical sense, because I mean, obviously you showed it to me when we spoke a while ago. I mean, just give people a sense of how it works in a practical sense. I mean, is it something you put in your ear? I mean, just explain how it works.
So the way it works at the moment is a device that's in between the sound source and your ear. And so, like with these headphones I'm wearing now, I could be using it on this call. I would plug my headphones into the unit, and it would then pre-process everything that I'm about to hear. And so I can then program that device using software applications and plugins, as we call them, to enhance exactly what I need to hear. So it'd match my hearing profile. It would understand the application I want to use it for, which could be talking to you on a call. It would understand the environment I'm in, and it becomes very intelligent and personalized to what I need. And so these first units are deliberately built so that you can use devices you already own. So
Right.
if you own Apple AirPods, you just connect it to the device
Okay.
and it will enhance all the sound that's delivered to your AirPods. If you have a wired headphone, same thing. And so, we've deliberately placed this as an upgrade for products that people already own rather than building the end product that will come later.
Yeah. Okay. I see that. I mean, that sounds to me like a very practical way forward. Because I mean, it's great to have ambition, but you've got to get stuff into people's hands, haven't you? Really? I mean, what was it? Stephen Jobs
Yeah.
says, entrepreneurs ship. And they ship stuff, don't they? And that's what you're doing. Yeah, and I,
Yep.
I get that. Let me ask you about building a business. I mean, you're building it in a particular sector, the kind of audiology sector. I mean, all the CEOs I know talk about building a business being like riding a roller coaster. Good days, bad days. What is it? What is it that you enjoy about doing this? I mean, when we spoke last time, I came away from the conversation being struck by your sort of enthusiasm. I mean, what is it that you enjoy about building a business in particular?
Um, I guess there's two main aspects to it. One is learning side. So even though I've been working in this area for about 30 years now, there is so much that we didn't realize was going on.
Yeah,
And so having access to that and building a platform that allows people to develop really interesting things, that I just find fascinating.
yeah,
So that's the first part. And the second part is getting that to somebody that needs it. And so, on a very simple basis at the weekend, we were working with DJs in Las Vegas to help them do particular things.
mm,
And that just wouldn't have happened if we only had access to, Bluetooth headphones. They just wouldn't use them. And our technology now allows them to do things that were seemed impossible just a few years ago. And so for me, it's about delivering technology that people think is impossible, but is now possible. Technology's really accelerated in terms of what its capabilities can do.
yeah,
Um, and if you write the right software, you can turn it into something pretty impressive.
yeah, yeah. And how do you feel about being the CEO?
Um, well, just back to your roller coaster analogy, there are very good times,
Mm,
which seem to be getting better and better the more progress we make. But there's also really tough times.
yeah,
And so there's a lot of things you have to deal with that nobody tells you about at the beginning. Everyone says, oh, you should go and build a company to create these hearing computers, which sounds really cool. But then you get into it and you realize there's a lot of other stuff you have to be on top of. You've got to be, part of a whole range of different tasks that no
yeah.
one explains to you. And there's no one to kind of just hand them off to yet.
Yeah. And I mean, just to pick up that point that you made a second ago, I mean, have you had to deal with any real big surprises when you thought, oh my God, I didn't think things were going to go that way? I mean, have you had any big surprises along the way?
Yes, yes. The first one was around different technologies that had been developed in other sectors that were very applicable to what we were doing. And so looking in new places for solutions to problems in our area was quite a big surprise, because there's a lot of stuff out there. It was just badged in a way that you wouldn't normally use it. So, for example, some of the processors we use are from professional studio equipment,
Right.
and some of the radio technology we use comes from asset tracking, but we repurpose it to do hearing applications. So that was quite a surprise to figure that out. Another piece is, you start off with a plan of how you think people are going to adopt it. And we were quite surprised when we found that the product makers are very kind of stuck in terms of the technology they use today. They're very constrained by Bluetooth. They're constrained by the ODMs that support them to create their products. And it's very difficult for them to break out of that. And so when we turn up with a completely new platform, it's difficult for them to adopt it, even if they really want to.
Mm.
So we had to simplify that journey for them by basically building the entire thing ourselves, which is what Remora is all about. It's creating that reference design in a device that's ready to go, and it works with all existing headphones. That wasn't part of our original plan, but we had to do that to get it into the market. And now that we've got adoption of that, it's moving much faster.
Mm. And how would you say your values have influenced the way you've built the company? I mean, is there a lot of, have you done it in a particular personalized way, would you say?
I'm not sure really. I think, we built it because there was a very urgent need in some cases,
Mm.
and everyone who's involved with the company has the same desires and motivation about making this happen. And everyone that is part of Sonical, we've worked together in various ways for, in some cases, more than 20 years. So we all
Right,
know each other,
right.
and it's a very tight team. And I like it that way. I like it that the
Mm.
people that we bring in understand what we're all about, and they understand where we want to take things.
Yeah. I mean, there's something to be said for working with a bunch of people that you really know well and you know you can get stuff done, isn't there? I mean, it's a really positive environment that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things, I mean, you mentioned your team. I mean, how do you, how do you create an environment, just to pick up the point we were talking about, how do you create an environment in which everyone can perform well? I mean, I know there are people that you know well and you get on with and they have some shared sense of the mission, but how do you as the CEO create an environment where people can do their best work? Could you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it's an overused analogy, but I very much believe that you need to work with people that are much better than you are at doing that particular
Yeah,
job. And they tell the rest of the team what they're finding and what's difficult, and what we should change. And so together, because we are a small group, we can figure things out much faster because we have experts in each area,
yeah.
rather than it all being controlled from one central source, which would be me telling people what to do. All I can do is guide them based on the information I get back.
Mm. So you're saying surround yourself with smart people. I mean, that seems to me to be pretty good advice.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And not just smart people, but highly motivated to
Yeah,
try new things. And, when you're building something like what we have, there's a lot of learning. We didn't have a complete plan when we started, and we didn't know exactly how it was all going to come together. But by building it in iterations, you quickly realize where you can fit the first version in, to help people the fastest. And we're already thinking about the next few steps ahead. That wouldn't happen if it was all decided by me in isolation. We need the team to be out there and discovering these
and I
things.
guess I guess what you're describing to me is a sort of a willingness to experiment and try stuff out and see what works. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Oh, you have to. Yeah, you have to almost throw away the old way of doing things.
Mm.
There's another overused saying that if you want to get to a certain place, you don't start where you're at today. You have to
Yeah,
start in a new place entirely. And that's what we had to do. Everyone was starting with these Bluetooth chips to build a headphone. And we said, right, we're not going to start there. We have to use something different. And that's how we're able to deliver much higher performance.
Yeah, yeah, that's a very interesting point there. Um, Let me ask you about one of the other things that's interesting is in relation to building a business is the level of uncertainty that's around. I mean, we've got all the kind of geopolitical stuff, we've got problems in the economy. I mean, there's lots and lots and lots of uncertainty. Um, I mean, what's your feeling about sort of leading the organization or the business, leading through, a very uncertain times? I mean, it's very exciting because there's lots of opportunity, but there's also an awful lot of uncertainty at the moment. I mean, what's your take on that?
I think we're just more aware of uncertainty, and it's kind of everywhere you look. I
Mm,
think uncertainty is always part of building a business, especially something that's quite innovative. You're never quite sure what's around the corner, and you deal with it as it happens. The I think the situation we're in at the minute, I think people are just more aware of it. That's all, and you just have to deal with it as it happens, and stay on the path as close as possible, but be willing to take a step to the side if you have to.
And have you had to take many sideways steps as a result of stuff changing?
Yeah, oh yeah. The biggest one was building the Remora system because that wasn't part of our original plan. We thought we would only be licensing technology to product makers, but
Right.
we've added this extra piece so that we've made it easier for them to start licensing it because everything's ready to go. We've done all the work for them. But that wasn't part of the original scope of work. And so to do that has required um, completely different thinking and different approach to working with people and allowing more partners to come on the journey with us. So that required a lot of support from the ecosystem that we've built and listening to our partners and listening to the chip companies and the software companies that work with us. And that's been a really big part of the support group that we've created.
I mean, lots of the entrepreneurs I've spoken to talk about the importance of those partnerships, those sort of stakeholder relationships. I mean, what's your take on? I mean, because I mean, what I hear is they're very important, but they also could be quite difficult to manage because you've got an awful lot of people. It's kind of like herding cats, I guess, isn't it? I mean, what's your take on that process? I mean, has it worked well for you? I mean, or has it created challenges?
Well, it has worked well, but it still is very difficult,
Yeah,
especially working with very large companies. So, as you can imagine, um, if you're working with let's say, a large chip company that's developing processors, they can change direction at any point. And because we're a small startup, we have no relevance to them. They'd say, oh, we're just going to stop that chip now, it's gone. And that could be a core part of our technology. And now we have to go and find a replacement. So there's a lot of risk involved when you don't have any control over their roadmap. But you need their support to create the platform. And so, we try to build strong relationships with these companies and give them an opportunity to be part of our platform. But there is risk involved.
Mm. And what's your? I mean, have any of those moments kind of shaped the way you think about being the CEO? I mean, things happen to you that have changed the way you think about what you're trying to do.
Not so much about what we're trying to do, but definitely how we want to do it.
Right.
There are often times when you think, well, if we didn't have any of the constraints that we have to work within, we would be much further ahead by now. But when you look backwards, you can see how much we've achieved with the limited resources that we have, which is quite impressive. And so it is difficult to always look at, where you want to be and the tools you have available. You always want to do more. You want to go faster.
Yeah.
You want to be
Yeah.
bigger. You want to have more customers. But you sometimes you just got to go at the pace of what's going on around you.
Yeah. It's like having a baby, isn't it? I mean, it just takes 9 months. It just is what it is. I mean, every
Right.
CEO I know wants to go faster, but sometimes you just
Right.
Can you? It's an interesting that one of the big frustrations I think. Let me ask you about some of the challenges involved. I mean, what would you say has been your biggest mistake?
Biggest mistake. Well, so far, and I'm sure there'll be other mistakes in the
Mm.
future. The biggest one so far was probably around the hardware platform selection.
Right.
So going back to working with big companies and developing on a processor that they assure you is going to be around for the next foreseeable future, and then they just end of life it, and everything you've developed is dependent on that system, and then it's gone, and you can't use it, you can't take it to a customer. That has been one of the biggest problems, selecting platforms that were kind of taken away from us. So what we do now is we make sure that our software can run on multiple platforms at once. So we're
Right.
not completely tied to just
You're
one. And
spreading the
if
risk, is what you're saying.
you have to, yeah. Whereas at the beginning, we just didn't have the bandwidth to do that. We had to just pick one and go with it. But sometimes that doesn't work out.
Yeah. Now, I mean, to come back to the point we were talking about a second ago about how, that's an example of what it's like to ride that roller coaster, isn't it? You come in on Monday morning, all of a sudden everything's changed. And it's,
Right.
that's also tough for the staff, though, I think. I mean, it's tough on the CEO, but it's tough on the staff. I mean, what is it that you do to kind of build resilience in your people? Because when those sorts of things happen, it can be pretty demoralizing, both for you, but also for your people.
Absolutely. Yeah. It is tough, especially for the people that have been working on something for
Mm.
months, and then all of a sudden they've got to change direction and effectively start again. That can be really tough.
And do you have thoughts
Um,
on how to help people with that?
um, well, we're very fortunate because the people that are around us are on this journey for the bigger vision, and we know
Right.
there's going to be bumps along the way. We know
Yeah.
it's not going to be plain sailing. We've done enough engineering projects between us to know that it's almost pointless planning too far ahead because you don't know what's going to come around the corner. But we also know how to deal with things because it's
Yeah.
happened many times before. We've all gone through really tough patches around product development or technology development, but we know how to deal with it.
Mm.
And so these things, they're not often a surprise. Um, we know what we have to do. It's just frustrating that it happens when it happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it involves an awful lot more work usually. That's been my experience.
Yeah, yeah, but in a lot of cases, you're not throwing away everything you've done before. There was a lot of learning in that.
Mm.
So when you do move to a new platform or you do find a new supplier, there's an ongoing ramp up, but you haven't completely started from scratch.
Yeah. I mean, one of the other things I've experienced is that sometimes I often think if things don't go to plan, the outcome will be bad. But sometimes when things haven't gone to plan, actually the outcomes have been better. I mean, have you had experiences where you've run into problems, but actually there's been better outcomes as a result of that?
Um, yeah, in fact, there was one fairly recently where we took our products, our prototypes, to a trade show, and our intent of that event was to leave with a couple of potential customers, product makers that were going to adopt our technology. And we did get to that point, but what was the real surprise around that event? It was the end user's response.
Right.
And so that's what really pushed us more towards building a final product, which we're now doing with Sony. It was because the end user's response to what we created was so profound. They wanted to buy the prototypes there and then. They wanted to
Wow.
take them with them.
Wow.
And that's never happened before to us at trade shows. Normally there's some interest, but not to that level. And that's when we realized we'd really hit something special. We
Yeah.
had something that people wanted to get access to immediately because they could see a use for it. And now that that's growing, the relationship we now have with Sony in the UK is really driving that, is to get products out faster.
Yeah. And let me ask you about the flip side of having to deal with problems. I mean, what would you say are what are the factors that have enabled you to be so successful?
It's definitely working with other companies and building that ecosystem,
Right.
building partnerships with every single layer of what we do, especially on the software side. I mean, there are amazing software companies out there that have created these AI based algorithms.
Yeah.
And when you hear what they can do and when you see the impact it has on people, it is amazing. We wouldn't have had access to that if we hadn't built our platform from the ground up. They just simply wouldn't talk to us. But now that we've created a way for them to get into the market, we're building really good relationships in areas that most people would just dismiss.
Mm,
They wouldn't be interested in it because it's not a mass market feature. It's very niche.
mm, mm.
But you put enough of those niche markets together, and suddenly you've got a very strong opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. I guess that's also that feeling must be pretty motivating as well, both for you and for the team. I mean, because you get a sense that you're really making progress, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, great example is we're working with this group in Newcastle in the UK, a bunch of neuroscientists and technology experts that are working on a relief for tinnitus. So obviously, I have the personal link to that.
Mm.
But when you see what people are creating, in most cases with no market visibility at all, they've created some amazing technology, and now we can help them get to their customers.
Yeah, yeah. And let me ask you about I mean, if you were to start again, is there anything that you would do differently knowing now? If you were to go back to square one, is there anything you'd do differently?
Oh yeah, yeah, quite a few things, of course. I mean, hindsight's great. Um, yeah, I think the big one is probably around fundraising.
Right.
We spent a lot of time talking to potential investors, and they just take you on their journey, and at the end of it, they just drop you, and that's a tough experience to learn
Yeah.
from. Having to go through weeks and weeks of these discussions with people. And so it probably took us a bit longer than it should have to realize that that wasn't the right path. And but you kind of start the journey because everyone around you is doing that same thing. They're all talking to the VCs, especially here in Silicon Valley, all trying to do the same fundraising exercise. But once we stopped and then we started working with some really helpful angel groups, then everything changed because they have a first of all, they have a need for what we create, and they have a much more relevant network of people to work with. So when you're working with companies in the music business or in the hearing health business or industrial applications, then you get access to a different set of people rather than just money people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've been through that process myself. And um, what were your thoughts on getting the business ready for funding? There's a lot of talk about, funding readiness. I mean, how did you get your business, your people, into a place when you were where you were ready to do that? I mean, how did you approach that?
It's really getting something you can put on the table and say, we built that.
Right. Okay.
Just getting out of PowerPoint mode
Yeah.
and like a wish list or a vision of the future, actually building something. And our first development systems were huge. I mean, they were kind of this size. And we were trying to explain to people how we can make it smaller and it'll eventually fit in your ear. But the fact that we built something and it was working and you could listen to it, that's what got people interested because we did all that really just by bootstrapping everything together. And now, of course, we just keep building and iterating and getting better and better. And that's when you start attracting the likes of Sony because you've done a lot of the hard work. You've gone through all of those pain points and de-risked it. So now we've got something that they can mass produce that they're really comfortable working with us.
Yeah.
But to do that at the beginning, we had to build something.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to be said for having something tangible to show people, whatever you're doing, I think. Because I
Definitely.
just think people relate to it better. You know.
Absolutely. The fact that you have something and it works and it does something different to everything else that they've been used to. And again, this wasn't part of our plan, but turning up to a trade show where someone's got a pair of AirPods and you say, right, pair it to this and I'll change how your AirPods sound and I'll make them sound amazing. that really got people excited
Mm.
because they just weren't aware that it could be changed,
Yeah.
rather than just a couple of things on their phone. We could completely change what these products do. People wanted.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. It's incredibly valuable to try stuff out, I think. Let me ask you a couple of final questions, really. One is about the role that AI plays in the way this technology is going to roll out. I mean, everybody's talking about AI at the moment. I'm presuming that there's a fairly significant AI component here. I mean, how is the way AI is developing going to shake down in your world?
The two areas we're focusing on at the moment is using these AI tools to help speed up development.
Right.
So the traditional way of developing hardware and software, it had been fairly well optimized, but now it can move so much quicker. So, we can build software applications with our partners much, much faster than we could before, because they can use these developer agents that can create code, and they can test it, they can validate it, and then they can deploy it onto our system really fast. So that's one aspect, is
Mhm.
speeding up the path to get new tech into the system. The other part is having an engine inside our product that can run these AI algorithms. And now some of these product companies are starting to catch up. So putting an AI engine at the edge that is completely user defined, that is a whole new transition, rather than the traditional way, which is, I've got an AI accelerator that can do one function. Let's say it does noise reduction. Well, that's just not interesting anymore, because the product has to do so many other
Yeah.
things. It's an evolving
And,
platform.
and what
So,
impact will that have on on users? I mean, how will that actually affect them?
well, it's a little bit like, the Uber story on mobile phones. If you put a piece of technology into a product, but don't get in the way of how it's used, then creativity will dictate
Yeah,
a whole new market for you. And so, Apple didn't put the GPS system into the phone thinking, oh, somebody's going to use this so that they can do a ride sharing application. They just put it together with an API and said, let these people have access to it. And we have the same vision around putting edge AI into our system. We're not going to tell you what to do with it, but we're going to give you access to all these capabilities, and then creativity will start producing these new applications. And it might help you hear, it might help you understand speech, it might help you with some other kind of sensors that are in the product. But it's not down to us to define this anymore. And that's where these product makers have been in the way for so long. They want to define everything for you
and that's
based
going
on
to
their
change
product.
now, isn't it?
It has to change. Yeah,
Yeah,
we have to get out of the way and let the end user define how they want to use this
yeah.
product. And it's
And
very specific to their needs.
yeah, and to what extent will you be able to collect and use and analyze data about that centrally?
Well, we can already figure out what people are using just
Right.
based on the plugins that are in the device. And so, we're not at the level of analyzing and taking out everyone's personal data, but we are at the level of, what plugins are people using? Why are the DJs all using this particular application? Why
Right.
are the music producers using something completely different? And what's missing? What else do they need?
Yeah.
So that's where the data level really helps us. It's figuring out where the next gaps are and then going and filling them.
Yeah. And you mentioned where the next gaps are. I mean, one last question. What are I mean, in terms of the next bit of the journey, I mean, what is it that particularly excites you?
Um, it's going to be the hardware platforms that are now being built. So we think of it like a giant flywheel, where we've got loads of companies developing applications and plugins, which then target whole new customer groups, and their needs then change, which means we need more capable hardware platforms. So that's the next stage. What is the hardware that people are going to be wearing to give them access to the next level of applications? That's what I'm most excited about. And looking at some of the chip roadmaps, the connectivity roadmaps, what people are doing with AI at the edge, and just bringing that together into a system. I think that's where we're going to see the next breakthrough of wearable technology. It's not going to be a one chip Bluetooth product anymore. It's going to be a multi chip system that can be customized using software.
Mm. I mean, that does sound pretty exciting because you'll be able to do so many different things with it, won't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
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 And then, we'll look back in a few years' time and say, do you remember when we used to have those headphones that all they did was play music and we would think we were crazy? Um, so that's the journey we're on. It's to get to a point where
Yeah.
we think that today's technology is outdated.
Yeah. A bit like TV with three channels or four channels or whatever it was
Right,
people years ago or
right.
something, you know.
Or even when
Anyway,
it was black and white.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, I remember all that stuff. Really, pretty depressing. Gary, thank you for making a bit of time to come and have a chat because I know you're pretty busy. I mean, what an interesting story and what a fascinating bit of technology that will have, a hugely. I mean, I think I mentioned to you last week. I mean, I know a number of people that have hearing problems, and my father had significant hearing impairments. And I think your technology will really help an awful lot of people. So, thanks for
Thank you.
making time to come and have a chat, and good luck going forward.
Thanks very much. Let's do this again when we've made some more progress.
Look forward to it. See you soon, Gary.
Thanks very much.
Cheers. Bye bye.